Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Grid Live Wrap Up. I'm Kobe Lambert from Grid Tonight, and with me are Ben Snyder from Grid Encore and Disastrous Info, filling in for Joe San Diego, and got Tanner Smith from Pit Box Press. And before we get started, I want to give a shout out to our great Patreon supporters, Colin, Mark, Deshelle, Robin, David, Matthew, who invest each month in the Grid Network. And we definitely encourage you to join these fine folks to keep us on the air if you like what you see tonight. And also we got super chats, buy me a coffee as well if you want to support us that way. And also you can follow us, you can see down the bottom of your screen at Grid Network TV. Follow us all across social media as well, and visit gridnetworktv.com, our website, for our latest content. There we post our full shows, some of our shorter segments as well, and also our race recaps from each race weekend. I think Matthew Bro will have his Pocono race recap up either later tonight or early tomorrow morning, so definitely encourage you all to go check that out. And it was an extremely busy weekend of racing all across the world, and we're going to start off with the NASCAR Cup Series race at Pocono Raceway.
Thank you, Kobe. Yes, honored to be filling in for Joe tonight, and I offer no opinions tonight. I'm strictly the moderator because we got a lot to get through with all the series, like you mentioned, Kobe, and we're going to start with the NASCAR Cup race at Pocono. Apologies there. It's been a minute since I've been on this show trying to get the camera straight here, but we got that figured out. Let's roll into the NASCAR Cup recap right now. Late race caution, I should say, for a spin from Shane Van Gisbergen set up a fuel mileage finish at Pocono. On the radio, crew chief James Small told Chase Briscoe to leave his pit stall on his command, but Briscoe left when the jack dropped and the number 19 team didn't get the car full of fuel. During the final runs to the finish, Small coached his driver on how to save enough fuel to make it to the end. Despite those concerns, Briscoe took the checkered flag for his third career win in the NASCAR Cup Series and his first as a Joe Gibbs Racing driver. He had to hold off his teammate Denny Hamlin to do it, who showed no signs of rust after, of course, missing the last race at Mexico City. So we'll bring Tanner back in here for this first question. Was this win a huge sign of relief for Briscoe, given all the pressure he was facing getting into a Gibbs car and replacing a former Cup Series champion, Martin Truex Jr.?
Absolutely, you'd have to think it would be. I mean, you're replacing someone of the caliber of Martin Truex Jr., a champion of the series, a guy that has won multiple Southern 500s, I believe, and multiple Coke 600s. So Martin Truex Jr. obviously needs no introduction, but Chase Briscoe, if you're talking about a casual fan, you might have to do a little bit of explaining. This race for sure definitely fell right into the hands of the 19 team with the way everything played out, and to Briscoe's credit, to kind of stretch the life of his fuel cell that far, 3 laps around Pocono Raceway is a very it's a very difficult little journey to pull off there. So you definitely got to tip your cap to them, and especially Briscoe. I mean, obviously, there was some sort of team communication breakdown that happened on that final pit stop that really could have prevented them from getting the victory and really plummeting down the playoff standings. But now they can just go out for the rest of the regular season and go out and take swings and try to win more races. Obviously, that was something they kind of struggled with since the playoffs of 2023 in Truex's tenure. So it'll be interesting to see how Small and Briscoe kind of take this win and this momentum going forward through the rest of the regular season and into the postseason.
Well, talking about playoff or pressure, rather, heading into the playoffs racing for Joe Gibbs, Briscoe is the third Gibbs driver to win this year. Hamlin has 3 wins. Christopher Bell has 3 wins. Ty Gibbs has still not won ever in the NASCAR Cup Series. He's crossed over 100 Cup starts now in his third full season, while Briscoe has now won a race in his first season with JGR. And although it's been a rough start to the season for Gibbs, he was in the mix for the win at Michigan and seemed to be the only driver who could hang with Shane Van Gisbergen in Mexico City. So after seeing Briscoe win, does this put more pressure on Ty Gibbs to finally get the job done? And how close do you think that 54 team is to finally getting to victory lane?
As far as like organizational pressure is, concerned, I don't think that Ty Gibbs is experiencing any of that. He will never get kicked out of that ride for as long as he wants to drive race cars. But if we're talking about internally, his mental pressure, he's definitely feeling that right now. He has to be. You see a guy like Briscoe hop into this car and within 20 races gets a race win. Looks pretty bad for you, not going to lie. But At the end of the day, Ty Gibbs is a champion in the sport in the Xfinity series, and he goes down to that series from time to time and shows just how talented he is. I just don't really understand what's not making ends meet in the next gen car for him. As soon as he came onto the scene in the Xfinity series, he won his first race in, spectacular fashion. And he continued that dominant stretch from his part-time season in 2021 all the way through his championship season of 2022. So he takes a ride early in Cup due to the unfortunate, end of career arc of Kurt Busch, and gets to run pretty much the second half of 2022, which I would have thought gave him a leg up going into his rookie season in 2023 and, subsequently 2024. And we've just really not seen much from him in terms of race-winning pace. And when he does have race-winning pace, he or his team shoot themselves in the foot. And, yeah, I'm just getting a little concerned that the 54 team, as it's currently constructed, is just not race-winning capable. And, I felt like they had a fast car today, and I just felt like they also didn't really capitalize. So seeing their teammate, who, like I said, is in his first half season with Joe Gibbs Racing, go out and win a race already, it is not a great look for that 54 team, and they should look ahead to try to, get the ship righted going into this final stretch toward the playoffs, because another season where they either don't make it or don't advance, it's not going to look good going forward. You definitely don't want to be falling into that Austin Dillon territory if you're Ty Gibbs. So definitely a lot of pressure on him, probably from himself. I'm sure he wants to go out and win, but as far as the organization's concerned, he's never going to have pressure there.
Yeah, well, given how quickly he won in ARCA and Xfinity, I think most people would have expected him to break through in Cup by now, but we'll keep an eye on him and see if he can do that sooner rather than later. Let's stick with the theme of Toyota drivers here. It was not a good day for all three from 2311 Racing. Riley Herbst and Bubba Wallace both had issues with brake rotor failure, sending them hard into the outside wall. Tyler Reddick, meanwhile, lost a lap while the team changed his brake rotors before he could suffer the same fate as his two teammates. So things have not necessarily gone well for 2311 lately, even when you look outside of the recent developments with their ongoing lawsuit away from the track against NASCAR. It's been a hard rookie year for Herbst, who's 35th in points. The first year 2311 has had a third full-time team. In the last 7 races, Wallace has finished 30th or worse 4 times. And while Reddick is in a good position points-wise for now, he hasn't shown the same race-winning speed we've seen from the 45 team in the past. They've also had trouble executing races on their end as well. Tanner, what's going on with 2311 Racing lately, and do you see them bouncing back from what's been a rough start to this summer stretch?
I'll answer the last part first. As far as bouncing back, I frankly am not sure. I think that there are a number of factors at play here, so I'll tackle them each individually. So with the 35 team, you've obviously got a rookie driver, a completely green rookie team. So obviously, much like the 71 team from last season that was powered by Trackhouse but run by Spire for Zane Smith, you're going to encounter a lot of problems and a lot of growing pains when you have such a green race team. On top of all that, you have a green Cup crew chief in Charles DeNike on the top of the 23's pit box. So even places where Bubba had speed in the past, you can't necessarily bank on him having speed there again, because the crew chief may not have the exact same, theory of, setting up the car as Booty Barker did. And then you move over to the 45 team, which is the team that theoretically should have the most, consistency as far as the group makeup is concerned, and they just haven't flashed any race-winning pace. You look at the 23 team, they've definitely had race-winning pace at Homestead, I would say probably even at Vegas, and maybe even coming into this weekend, but unfortunately that poor lack of qualifying effort, I guess we'll say, kind of put a damper on that. So when you take all of these factors together, I think that the 35 being so green and the 23's pit crew not pit crew, but crew chief, I should say, not being as experienced in the Cup Series is going to bring the whole team down to some extent. But I'm really looking at Billy Scott and Tyler Reddick, and I'm starting to wonder if they've kind of plateaued as a crew chief driver combination. I would have felt that obviously coming into this season, adding a third team, that this team wouldn't skip a beat. And we've made it to nearly the halfway point, and Tyler Reddick hasn't even really contended for a race win to this point. And he made the championship for last year. He was last year's regular season champion. And we've just seen nothing from that team. I don't think that like the lawsuit or anything like that is like getting in the way of this team's performance. I don't think anybody in that shop is thinking about that at all. But you do have to wonder, like, as far as like the individual teams are concerned, like, are Reddick and Scott a match made in heaven long term? I'm not so sure. As far as Wallace and DeNike, I think that you've definitely got to give them some more time to marinate and, you know, build chemistry with one another. I think some of the early returns show that there's a lot of potential there with that pairing, but with a 35 team, they practically act like he's not even part of the group most of the time. So I really wouldn't be surprised to see Herbst continue to struggle. I mean, we saw him take several years in Xfinity and top tier equipment and not win. So you even put him in top tier equipment and Cup, he's going to probably flounder around for a little bit before he starts showing some signs of life.
All right, we'll leave the race recap there. Tanner, before we move on to IndyCar, what were your quick thoughts on Prime Video and Amazon's first season of NASCAR coverage now with their 5 race stretches wrapped up?
My thoughts are that it's a shame that their 5 race stretch is over and it couldn't have been extended. But I got to tip my cap to Amazon and their crew. I think that they did a fantastic job building out a very robust coverage team that is just chock full of talent. I mean, even Corey LaJoie provided a lot of exceptional commentary. And frankly, I was highly questioning his inclusion as part of this lineup. But I got to hand it to him. Carl Edwards, that whole team, they do a great job of analyzing the race from a driver's point of view. Danielle Trotta does an exceptional job hosting those kind of segments with those two. And, the booth, I've had very vocal, very public criticisms of Adam Alexander in the past, but I'm ready to shut up. That man has proven me wrong and has really worked on his craft, and he delivered 5 exceptional races as a booth talent. So my hat's off to that entire crew. I really appreciated the coverage that they offered, the exceptional post-race commentary and show that we would get every week is something that I will not take for granted and will be begging for when TNT will inevitably cut away from one of these next 5 races and show it like the third Transformers movie for like the 80th time in the last 10 years. So yeah, all that to say, Prime did an exceptional job and they should be the standard going forward. And it's really nice and frankly energizing to see a broadcast partner take the sport and, everything about it just so seriously and also still manage to carry some whimsy throughout the broadcast. Like, even when we'd be in the heat of the moment battling for the lead, like you could still tell that Adam, Dale, and Steve were all having a lot of fun up there calling the races, and their chemistry was infectious. So yeah, I'm looking forward to what they have going forward, but yeah, I definitely think this was a massive step up over Fox.
Yeah, well, we do have the same booths for TNT in the next 5 races as well,
True.
so there will be a little bit of overlap on that front. But I think a lot of people echoing that same sentiment. Great first season for Prime, and we'll see if they can keep it up in 2026 and beyond. In the meantime, now we move on to the NTT IndyCar Series, and for the 6th time in 9 races, Chip Ganassi Racing and Alex Palou went to victory lane. Honda remains undefeated in 2025. However, it wasn't your typical race where Palou dominated from start to finish as the clear-cut favorite to win. We saw the race come down to a fuel mileage finish, with Palou and teammate Scott Dixon needing to save fuel on an alternate strategy. Dixon didn't have enough to make what he needed, pitted with a few laps remaining, and managed to finish in 9th place. However, Palou, being 2 laps better to the good than his teammate was, took the checkered flag and still had enough fuel to even do a full cool-down lap while multiple other drivers stopped towards the end of the front stretch because they ran out of fuel. That's how close they were cutting it. Felix Rosenqvist was going to be in prime position to steal the win if Palou had run out, but the Meyer Shank Racing driver instead had to settle for a second place finish rather. Santino Ferrucci got out of his car, which ran out of fuel. He caught a beer from a fan over the fence and chugged it to celebrate his third place finish. This is Ferrucci's second podium in the last 4 races and his 4th straight top 5 finish. And his teammate David Maluka spun and got stuck in the gravel on lap 1, but rallied back to finish in 7th place. Now let's bring Kobe back into the discussion here, and we'll go to him first on this one. Outside of his Indianapolis 500 victory, was this Palou's most impressive win of the year? He's had quite many you could pick from since he didn't emerge until the end. And what are your thoughts as well on the Foyt team turning things around at that shop lately?
Yeah, this was a bit different than Alex Palou's previous wins this season, because in his other wins, he was hands down the best driver in the fastest car, and he just put the beat down on the field. But this time around, had quite a handful of leaders in this race, with the different strategies, and then going through all the caution flags we saw as well. So Alex Palou, he had to really go through a lot to try to win this race. It wasn't straightforward like we've seen in the other events. I know at the start, Palou didn't really get the best start. He dropped back a little bit, and then when the strategy was shuffling around, he had to start like mid-pack, and when you start mid-pack, a lot of things can go wrong, but he was able to get the positions he needed there. And then at the end, we're wondering, could Alex Palou save enough fuel? Unfortunately, his first teammate, Scott Dixon, he wasn't able to save and had to come in for a splash at the end. And for his sake, it still wasn't a bad finish for him. I think Scott Dixon finished 9th. So not a bad day for the number 9 team as well, because at one point it looked like Dixon might drop, to outside the top 15, but they at least salvaged something, especially when Dixon had a very poor qualifying effort on Saturday. But looking at Alex Palou, thought it was real impressive, on a 4-mile monster of a road course that Road America is, that he could save that amount of fuel and still make it all the way around and drive the victory lane. He literally drove all the way back around the 4-mile track on the cooldown lap. It's just real crazy that he was able to do that. But I guess I shouldn't be surprised at this point, because Palou is having a historic season of dominance in the IndyCar series. Is amazing. Out of 9 races, 6 race victories, and what's been dubbed as one of the most competitive open wheel racing series in the entire world. And while it wasn't the typical domination you saw from Alex Palou, was very impressive. He was able to overcome so many different variables to get this race victory today. And in regards to AJ Foyt Racing, this might be a hot take, but I think AJ Foyt Racing has looked more impressive than Team Penske lately. And I can't believe I'm actually saying that, because remember, pre-Indy 500, we were talking about what's going on with AJ Foyt Racing. They aren't showing the same form that they showed last year after the departure of Michael Cannon. And we thought, that losing Michael Cannon, AJ Foyt Racing was going to be on the back foot and they were going to be struggling throughout the year. But once they got through the Indy 500, it's like a light switch flipped on or something, because David Malukas, been really impressive, and Santino for Ferrucci as well. No, Ferrucci's currently 9th in that points. I think Malukas is currently 12th. And you mentioned Ben Ferrucci's been impressive lately. Last 4 races, top 5 finishes and two podiums as well. Yeah, things looking good for the 14. And David Malukas, he spun himself at the start of the race. Well, actually, he misjudged his braking point. I think he got in the back of Pato Award or Christian Lungard, or one of those guys. Mm-hmm. And then Lungard, and then spun himself out. Had to get help from the safety team to get out of the gravel, and then ended up getting a top 10 finish. So real impressive. I remember at one point looking up at the running order, and Malukas was 26 on the restart, and they come from 26 to get a top 10 there on strategy. Not bad at all. And the reason why I say that Malukas and Ferrucci's performances for Foyt look more impressive than Penske lately, because when you look at Penske's results last 3 races post Indy, if we're going to look at all of their drivers, now we're going to talk a little bit about Penske in a moment. Will Power finished 4th, 27th, and 14th. Scott McLaughlin has 2 12th place finishes and then 24th. And then Josef Newgarden has 9th and a pair of 25th place finishes. So it seems like things are going well for the so-called Penske Junior team right now, while the Penske Senior team is having quite a bit of trouble. Stay tuned for more on that.
Yeah, just to go back to Palou, I think that this was definitely his most adventurous win of the season. He definitely had to fight through a good bit of adversity and through a good bit of the field to get his way into victory lane and take the top step of the podium. But I don't know. I look towards St. Pete and think that was a little bit more hard-earned. I think that for him to start that race 10th and have to come into that final pit stop. I think he was either 4th or 6th. I can't remember. But to come out with the lead and then not only hold off a hard-charging Josef Newgarden and a hard-charging Scott Dixon, who both haven't won on a road course in the hybrid era, I think that in itself was a little bit more impressive than today, where he kind of just had to coast behind his teammate and, not let Felix Rosenqvist catch him. I do think that, he had to do a fair bit of fighting in the middle of the race, but once he got by Will Power for the final time, I didn't really feel like he had a whole lot to contend with. So as far as ranking his wins on the season, I would still rank this below St. Pete, but it was certainly more hard fought than his win at Barber, we'll say. As far as AJ Foyt Racing, I am definitely a little surprised at how well they've been performing as of recent, but I'm not going to go as far as to say that they're performing better than Team Penske. I just think that they are executing and finishing better than Team Penske is. I mean, it's easy to forget Josef Newgarden had a 5-second lead last week before Louis Foster wrecked in front of him and he flew up onto him. So, they could have easily won that race last week had, something insane not happened. Not only that, had Will Power not lost a tire, we could have been talking about him contending for that win, but also you have to look at if David Malukas doesn't get put in the wall by Kyle Kirkwood last week, he may have gone out and won that race. So I just think this is more a sign of the Chevy manufacturer teams finally starting to catch up a little bit on the hybrid as opposed to Honda. I felt like Honda had the leg up at first because I feel like their engineers, their people have had way more experience working with hybrid components and hybrid technology that just in general, they know how to get the most out of it, even though it was, a joint project with the Chevy manufacturing team, with General Motors. I still feel like when you have people in your camp that have actively worked on hybrid components and things of that nature, you are likely to have better results than the side that didn't do that before. So all that to say, I think AJ Foyt Racing has been stronger because Chevy as a whole has been stronger. I mean, even look at today, Penske was running up front at different points, not at the very front, but still around that 4th to 10th area, which is definitely an improvement over what they looked like at Barber. So yeah, I definitely don't think that Foyt looks better than Penske necessarily. I think that's a lot of results-based thinking rather than watching, how the cars actually race during the event. But it's definitely getting a little concerning that Penske is not executing in the Penske perfect way that they normally are. So that's something to definitely look out for.
Well, all three of their drivers didn't finish the race last weekend at Gateway. Road America was also a major disappointment, as it turns out. Scott McLaughlin did lead early, but he faded to 12th place after an untimely caution. Will Power was never really a factor during the race. He finished 14th, but the most notable thing to talk about is the slump that Josef Newgarden is in. After 9 races, his best finish up to this point is 3rd place in the season opener at St. Pete. His next best finishes are 9th and 10th at Detroit and Barber, respectively. Otherwise, it's been an uncharacteristically bad season for the number 2 team. An issue with the seatbelt led to a last-place finish at Long Beach. He then had the fuel pressure issue that took him out of the Indianapolis 500, ending his bid for 3 in a row there. And, of course, Tanner, as you mentioned, last weekend he crashed into Louis Foster at Gateway and flipped upside down while he was leading the race. Today at Road America, Newgarden was exiting turn 14 and head onto the long uphill front stretch, but he got too wide on exit, spun into the tire barriers, and that ended his race. And in the first 9 races, Newgarden has finished outside the top 10 6 times, and today was his 4th DNF of the year. He leaves Road America 17th in points, while his teammates are 7th and 8th. So, Tanner, what's going on with Josef Newgarden, and do you think the bleeding will stop anytime soon?
I don't know how the bleeding will stop. It'll probably come at an oval. But what I think is going on with Josef Newgarden is the fact that, again, we implemented this hybrid component on the back of the car. It adds 100 pounds to the rear of the car. When was Josef Newgarden a rookie in the NTT IndyCar series? The answer, 2012. What was significant about 2012? Well, that was the first year of this chassis that we've been running ever since then. So For Josef Newgarden's entire NTT IndyCar Series career, that includes 2 Indy 500 wins, 2 championships, and a ton of race wins in between, he has only been running the DW12. And when you add 100 pounds of, weight to the rear of the car, it's going to change the way that you drive the car and how much slide the rear is able to get. And unfortunately for Josef Newgarden, and to an extent, I think Scott Dixon as well, who has been completely winless since the hybrid component was added last year, whereas Newgarden did win at Gateway last year. I think that those two drivers in particular have been adversely affected by the lack of ability to slide the rear of the car around and rotate it. So, yeah, I think that has more to do with their lack of success more than anything at the two team. On top of that, you have to add in a second consecutive year of talk at the Indy 500 around the cheating Penske's. So not only that, you have to look at Tim Cindric's dismissal as well. I got to imagine after their long working relationship that's probably affecting him in some way. But yeah, I just think it's a combination of factors. But I think if I were to look at anything in particular, it has to be the hybrid component and the weight that it added to the rear of the car. I think that the way Newgarden likes to drive his race car was kind of neutralized by how the hybrid component has added weight to the back of it. So I guess until he's able to adapt to this new addition to the car, I guess he's going to continue to struggle, which is really unfortunate because he is one of the stars of the sport, and as Fox notes, has the best jawline in the sport as well.
Yeah, if you would have told me at the beginning of this season that Josef Newgarden would be 17th in points at this stage in the season, I would be completely shocked because I didn't see this coming. I don't think anybody saw this coming. I think it kind of started, towards the second half of last year, with Josef Newgarden, for most of his IndyCar career, he's looked like one of those special drivers on the racetrack who can do stuff that not a lot of other drivers can. And to your point, Tanner, as soon as this hybrid engine has come upon the IndyCar series, it really seems like, as you say, has neutralized Josef Newgarden a bit, and like what made him special, has really taken quite a hit there. And I still think that Josef Newgarden certainly has it in him. And I think if it wasn't for what happened with Louis Foster last Sunday night at Gateway, we'd probably be talking about, a Josef Newgarden victory on that track. I thought he was probably going to win that race if it wasn't for the incident with Louis Foster. And I still think that there's going to be opportunities for that number 2 team to win a race later in the season. We got the doubleheader at Iowa. We got Milwaukee and then Nashville, ovals. But, Josef has also, shown strengths on the road course as well. Go to Mid-Ohio next time out. And in Mid-Ohio, he's actually won there before and finished on the podium more than once. So that he could very well, get things rolling the next time out once the series goes to the Mid-Ohio sports car course. But as far as championship right now, I think that's a lost cause. I think the best thing that number 2 team can do is, just try to get some stability, try to roll off some good results and end the year on a high note with some good momentum heading into 2026. Because as you said, Ben, it's been an uncharacteristically bad season for Newgarden. I think it's safe to say he's in quite a slump right now, but I think his morale, not just his morale, but the whole morale of the number 2 team, and I guess, all the Team Penske's IndyCar side that's been surrounded by controversy during the month of May, I think it would be really good for him to get a win very soon. But it's just interesting looking at his season, because before today, the incidents that really took him out of contention in those races, wasn't necessarily his fault. The seatbelt, issue. We've seen that with Team Penske before. It got Will Power last year, then got Newgarden at Long Beach, and then, issue out of his control at Indy as well. And then there was really nothing he could have done in that situation with Louis Foster. We already talked about it last week when they should have threw the caution sooner. And maybe if they'd done that, that incident wouldn't have happened. And then, today just made a mistake. Really hate to see that for him. Hopefully he'll turn things around soon.
Yeah, PTSD is coming back for me because that happened to AJ Allmendinger at 2013 at the Indianapolis 500 as well. So it's been something that Penske's had to face even just beyond the last couple of years. But like you said, Kobe, hopefully we can see them turn things around soon. But let's talk about the race today, Road America. Just generally speaking, we had a little bit of everything. We had some hard racing. and all sorts of different strategies, 11 different leaders, good amount of passing, and not knowing who would win the race until the very end with a fuel mileage finish. Now, IndyCar is continuing the post-Indy 500 momentum that the series has going on right now. A good race on the streets of Detroit and an exciting short oval race at Gateway under the lights in prime time with strong TV ratings to reflect that success has set the stage now for another good race after a string of straightforward races with little to no cautions and complaints about the hybrid engine amidst Alex Palou's dominance. We also had an announcement over the weekend about Dallara building a new IndyCar chassis for 2028, a lighter car with more horsepower and a 2.4-liter engine. And Kobe, I know you said earlier today you feel like IndyCar is finally turning a corner with this hybrid. How badly did the series need this momentum after the scandalous month of May that we had with Penske?
Yeah, I think post Indy 500 it couldn't have gone any better for the IndyCar series, and I want to think that they've turned a corner with the hybrid system. I'm not entirely sure, obviously, because I'm not an engineer. But if we're just basing it solely on the eye test, I've been really impressed with the racing that we've seen. During the first part of the season, we saw Alex Palou dominating, and we saw very little overtaking during the actual road and street course races during the early part of this year, which was really disappointing because you usually don't see such a lack of action in the NTT IndyCar series. So I thought what we saw in early 2025 was quite a big letdown compared to what we're used to. And then the Indy 500, obviously, the racing wasn't as good as we've seen in recent years. Definitely not the most exciting Indy 500 I've seen. And then the three races after that, Detroit, for all the chaos that track has had in the last couple of years or so, to put on a good race there, I thought that was a pleasant surprise. And then Gateway, we were kind of worried that the cars were going to get stuck in that dirty air and not be able to pass, but that was an action-packed race, and they absolutely nailed the package under the lights on the short oval at Gateway. And in Road America today, I thought the race had everything, really solid race. So to have three races in a row after the Indianapolis 500 go extremely well, I thought that they really needed this. And also, as you mentioned, the strong TV numbers to reflect, the decision to move the Gateway race to prime time on the night of Fallujah really showed that was a great idea. And I also was reading an article on Racer.com earlier in the week saying that IndyCar was hoping to try to find more Sunday night races in the future. I think that would be really good, for, let's say, obviously Gateway, then Iowa as well, and maybe they could potentially do a Saturday night race in Nashville potentially. Maybe if they move it up a few weeks or so, or maybe we get a new season finale and they move Nashville earlier on in the season. I think it would be really, really cool to see some more nighttime racing, since it seems like we have fewer of those these days than we have had in the past. And then obviously we're going to touch on the 2028 IndyCar chassis on grid tonight. Some promising things there, but we know it's time to move on from this DW12 chassis. We've been very appreciative of how safe they made this car and how this car has evolved over time from a safety standpoint, but it's still really crazy to think about that. I believe I was a sixth grader when this car first came about, and I'm like 4 or 5 years out of college now, and we're still on the same chassis that we've had since 2012. So it was definitely a welcome announcement that we're gonna have a new car in 2028. It was originally supposed to be 2027, but they decided to push it back another year. So hopefully that remains on schedule. And everything that they're promising with this new car, I hope it performs, and also hope it's more suited to the hybrid system that we're going to continue to have moving forward.
Yeah, I thought that the race today was pretty good, even though it was kind of a mess, especially to get started. Like, it felt like the first 20 laps of the race got completely wiped out by cautions after cautions after cautions. But after we struggled for so long before the Indy 500 to get some cautions, frankly, it's kind of nice to have a race that's kind of a bit of a mess. I think that, to go back to a point that I mentioned earlier, I think that the Chevy teams starting to catch up has led to a more, I would say, competitive grid as a whole. I felt that for much of the last year, because it's almost been a year since we started this experiment back at Mid-Ohio last year, I felt that the Chevys have really kind of been at a bit of a disadvantage, and it feels like they're finally starting to narrow that out. So with some of the more impressive talents in the field, your Scott McLaughlin's, your Josef Newgardens, your Will Powers, your Pato Awards, your Christian Lundgaards, your Alexander Rossi's, etc. You know, when those guys aren't able to really contend for wins, that really brings the caliber of competition and the, you know, prestige of the sport down a bit. And now that they're starting to finally catch up, it finally feels like these drivers have all kind of adapted to what the hybrid can do for your race and, you know, out of the corner, going into the corner, down the straightaway, etc. So, all that is to say, it seems like everything's finally coming together for IndyCar, and they're putting on the races that we all know that they're capable of, which is really nice to see. As far as how badly this series needed this momentum after a scandalous month of May, I mean, I feel like the scandals were mostly overblown and then underblown. I feel like the Penske one that offered no inherent mechanical advantage, which we heard from a series of engineers, I felt that was overblown. And then Andretti losing 2 cars at the end of the Indy 500 because they were illegal, that got hardly any action in comparison. So I feel like if you had any aspersions to the IndyCar product and the sanctity of the series, I feel like you probably were just a little bit too overdramatic in the moment. And I would hope that you would let that go at this point, seeing as they didn't even win that race. And haven't won a race this season. Penske has been very imperfect this year. So the thought that they were cheating and all this is just so silly when their cheating is not even getting them into victory lane. So all that to say, it's good that IndyCar is finally putting on the races that we know they're capable of, and it's really nice to see a lot of on-track action and a lot of passing, and unfortunately at times, you know, a couple of accidents. So great work, IndyCar. Keep it up and get an independent, you know, officiating board next year, please.
Yes, and thank you, Tanner. My apologies to the Penske fans out there. Maybe this proves your point. I completely forgot about the 2 Andretti cars and the Prema car that got disqualified at the end of the race. Of course, the Penske scandal happened during the qualifying session. So again, maybe that just speaks to the point that you were making there as well. But it really was a scandalous month of May on multiple fronts. So again, apologies if any Penske fans are watching that. I didn't mean to single your team out there. But in the meantime, we move on now to the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship. Just like IndyCar at Road America and NASCAR at Pocono, we got a fuel mileage finish. The IMSA GTP cars had to go through the same thing at the end of Sahlen's 6 hours of the Glen. Now, the front-running GTP cars were running very low on energy, especially the number 31 Action Express Racing Cadillac and the number 93 Meyer Shank Racing Acura. Action Express led early in the rain, had issues on pit road that put them at the back, and drove through the field with a chance to win. Coming to the white flag, Earl Bamber came to the pits as the number 93 Meyer Shank Acura of Nick Yellowly followed him, ending the number 93's hopes of going back-to-back after winning at Detroit. But it was still a Meyer Shank Racing Acura on the top step of the podium, with Tom Blomqvist and Colin Braun taking the overall win in the number 60 Acura. Both Wayne Taylor Racing Cadillacs finished on the podium after a difficult 24 hours of Le Mans. Also, we have to give a shout-out to the number 63 Lamborghini for finishing on the lead lap in 7th overall after all the reliability issues that they've had with their cars. We also have a championship-leading number 7 Porsche crash out of the race when Nick Tandy spun on the curb exiting turn 1 and crashed hard into the tire barriers. Both Tandy and Felipe Nasser were tied for second in the Grid Endurance Performance Index entering Watkins Glen. Matt White will provide an update on that on Grid Tonight on Wednesday. Kobe, how compelling was the battle for the overall win throughout the race?
I thought the entire race in general was super compelling because the race started off early a few minutes after noon Eastern time, and right when the green flag dropped, guess what else dropped? Raindrops from the sky. So at first it just started to drizzle, you know, and it was no big deal. And then as it continued to drizzle, you know, the track started getting quite slick out there, and it was treacherous moments because the cars were on slick tires. And then they like cut away, and we come back from commercial, and it's a full-blown monsoon, a downpour, and then you see cars sliding off the racetrack and all of that. Then they had to switch to the wet weather tires, and we were in wet weather conditions for quite a while. And then once that cleared away, you know, it was just sunshine and blue skies after that, and the race was on. And looking at the caution that set up that finish, another number 36 Corvette, I think Charlie Eastwood was behind the wheel of that car. And it was unfortunate for them and for that number 36 Corvette in GTD, because it looked like they were going to be in line to get a podium finish, until they were stalled there. And we obviously needed to throw the caution there, since the car was in a bad spot on the track that set up. Yeah, not necessarily a fuel mileage finish, but an energy mileage finish, with the hybrid technology that they have in the GTP class. So, and actually NBC, they're actually showing the graphics of how much energy these prototypes have. And heading into that final restart with about 2 laps to go, I was really nervous with some of the front runners, because they're showing that some of them had like 4% energy, and I didn't know who was going to make it. And it definitely got to be a heartbreaker for the top two, coming to the white flag. Hate it for Earl Bamber, Action Express Racing. To their credit, as I said on our Le Mans wrap up, they ran a much better race than they've run in the last couple of years at Le Mans. But unfortunately, issues out of their control took them out of that, and then come back to IMSA, their day job, to go out there and have a shot to win after everything they've had to come through in this race to try to win, and then you come 1 lap short. Definitely hurts for them, and then hurts for the 93 as well. Nick Yellowly thought he could potentially make it as well, but neither of them could. And then catbird seat, Colin Braun and Tom Blomqvist there to steal a win there. But although the number 93 can go back to back, Meyer Shank still goes back to back, because you got to win for each car. The 93 and now the 60. Thought it was a really good race, and I'm looking forward to Matt's update on Wednesday night to see what happens with Felipe Nasr and Nick Tandy. It was a real surprise there to see Tandy get up on the curve and just crash the Porsche there. That's major championship implications as well. And once IMSA updates the points, have to see how that affects them in the GTP championship.
All right, well, let's move over to LMP2 now. It was the number 22 United Autosports team of Paul di Resta, Rasmus Lind, and Dan Goldberg, who were the winners in that class. But there was a scary moment that occurred early in the race during wet weather conditions. It involved the PR1 Matheson Motorsports and TDS Racing entries. Rodrigo Salas in the number 52 LMP2 got spun by the number 1 Paul Miller Racing GTD Pro BMW of Madison Snow, exiting the boot section of the track. With Salas sitting in the middle of the track, he got hit head-on by Stephen Thomas's number 11 LMP2 car. As the LMP2s and a few GT cars suffered damage, Thomas got the worst end of it because the entire windshield popped off due to the big impact. So, Kobe, how concerning is it to see an entire windshield fly off of an LMP2 car, and should this incident be investigated?
It should absolutely be investigated. I've been watching sports car racing for a long time, Ben, since the 2013 season. It was the last year of the Rolex Sports Car Series and the last season of the American Le Mans Series before they both series united in 2014 to become what today is the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship. And over my decade of watching sports car racing, I've seen a lot of things, but that's one thing I've never seen before. It was just so shocking to see the entire windshield fly off. And NBC interviewed Stephen Thomas after the fact, and he said that at first he didn't even realize that his windshield had completely flown off until he felt the raindrops hitting his visor. It's just such a surreal accident to see. And if you go on social media, you can see this incident for yourself in some of the photos that have come from this. It's just remarkable. I know LMP2 used to be open top class and all of that in the past, but to see the windshield fly off this car, it was just a stunning sight. When you look at the replay of the incident, he hit Rodrigo Salas at such a high rate of speed that it just flew off, and it's definitely a safety concern. I think obviously IMSA should investigate it. Orica should investigate it. Maybe you get obviously FIA to ACO investigate as well, because you have LMP2 racing all around the world, whether it's in IMSA, the Asian Le Mans Series, the European Le Mans Series. This is the type of stuff that should not happen at all. And I'm really happy that as soon as that nothing like flew into the cockpit that could have potentially struck Stephen Thomas on the helmet. I think that's a major concern to see this windshield fly off. I'm still surprised hours after this happened.
All right, well, looking at the remaining class winners, it was the number 48 Paul Miller Racing BMW of Dan Harper and Max Hesse who won in GTD Pro, while the number 27 Heart of Racing team, Aston Martin of Tom Gamble, Casper Stevenson, and Zachary Robichon won in GTD. IMSA returns to action on July 13th at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park with LMP2, GTD Pro, and GTD, as GTP gets a break until Road America in early August. We move on now to Supercars. Brock Feeney continued to separate himself from the rest of the Supercars field after dominating the entire Darwin Triple Crown race weekend. He won all 3 poles in all 3 races as he picked up his 5th consecutive race win dating back to the last 2 races in Perth. While Feeney looked untouchable, his teammate Will Brown struggled to keep up after not being close to Feeney in qualifying and finishing 8th, 7th, and 5th. With 2 race weekends and 6 races at Townsville and Queensland remaining in the Sprint Cup part of the season, Feeney has extended his points lead to 183 points over Brown. And we'll bring Tanner back in for this one and go to you first on this, Tanner. Does Brock Feeney seem destined to clinch the Sprint Cup title and ultimately become the first driver to clinch a playoff berth? I feel like we're talking about NASCAR in 2015.
I was just going to say the first thing I want to bring up is how NASCAR this sounds with the Sprint Cup title, but I wasn't on social media much last night. Did anyone call him Brock Threeney by chance for going triple this weekend? Regardless, the guy has been on a heater all season long, and it's really weird because his teammate is the defending series champion, and it feels like Will Brown's been getting his doors blown off by Feeney practically this whole year. And obviously that's no slight to Will Brown. He's a fantastic driver, but Brock Feeney has really shown up this year and really put everything out there, and it shows in the win column. And, it just seems like every week that Red Bull car always manages to find its way up into the podium positions. And yeah, I think it'd be really unwise to say that he's not going to go out and win the effective regular season title this year. I mean, he's clearly been the most consistent and he's winning the most. He seems like a practical shoo-in to win this regular season title, and we can only hope that if he can do that, he can hold on to win the other title. But if I know anything about the NASCAR playoffs, which is what the final system for Supercars is supposed to kind of emulate, it's really anyone's guess who's going to go out and win that. So definitely got to tip your cap to Brock Feeney and that entire 88 team. They have been fantastic this year. They've been fast everywhere they go, and it'd be a real shame if they don't come out of this as the series champion of 2025 with the performances that they've put up this season.
I really like the name Brock Threeney, and actually, Tanner, they used to call him Mr. Sunday because during the early part of his supercar career, because he never went on Saturday, but the only day he would win was on Sunday. And now I guess you can say he can win any day of the week now, because Brock Feeney has definitely become one of the top drivers in this Supercars championship. As you mentioned about his teammate Will Brown, the defending champion of this series, getting his doors blown off, and Will Brown has honestly just been average this season compared to Feeney, who's completely looks like a special driver who is just doing real amazing things on the racetrack. And I would be surprised at this point if he doesn't win the Sprint Cup title. And I think he's certainly destined to do that, even if he doesn't win in the next 2 race weekends. If he can just remain consistent, I think that Sprint Cup title is going to be his. And as we get into the finals, which is their playoff system they're debuting this year for the very first time, Brock Feeney keeps his form up heading into the finals. I know we got the Enduro Cup after we get done with the Sprint Cup part of the season, but once we get into the final, I think Brock Feeney keep his form going. He's going to be really hard to beat for this year's championship. And I know under the old system, if Brock Feeney was performing like this, we'd be like, does Brock have is starting to get one hand on the championship as he continues to pull away? But we really can't say that. Obviously, since they've changed the format around, but all in all, I thought it was a great weekend for Brock Feeney to win all 3 poles, win all 3 races, and now on a 5-race winning streak as we head into the final 2 rounds of this Sprint Cup championship season. Now we got the streets of Townsville coming up, and then we'll crown the Sprint Cup champion in Supercars to return to Queensland's Raceway.
All right, thank you for that, Kobe and Tanner. And now, Kobe, I'll turn it back over to you. I think we have a couple more series to recap as we move into the home stretch of our show tonight.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. And we're going to start off with MotoGP here. And Marc Marquez, who started the weekend by claiming Poland taking the sprint race win. Then in the Italian Grand Prix at Mugello, Marquez led a Ducati sweep of the top 4 positions. Ducati had all 6 riders across 3 teams in the top 12, continuing their dominance of MotoGP. And the second best manufacturer was Aprilia, with Marco Bezzecchi in 5th place for the factory team. Trackhouse Racing had both riders, Raul Fernandez and Acura, finish in the top 10. Then KTM had Pedro Acosta and Brad Binder in the top 10 as well for the KTM factory team. And next weekend, MotoGP heads to the Netherlands for the Dutch TT. And now shifting gears to Formula E, the Jakarta E-Prix saw plenty of chaos as the racing was physical, a characteristic that's been a hallmark of Formula E in the past. And we also saw a first-time winner in Formula E, and it was Dan Ticktum from the Cooper Acura team, who took the lead and held off Eduardo Mortara and Nico Mueller, with those three finishing on the podium. The championship leader, Oliver Rowland, finished 10th, only claiming 1 point, but he can wrap up the title pretty easily in Berlin if things go his way. But the big story was Nick DeVries and Jake Dennis fighting for the lead. Because the two made contact, Dennis ended up losing his front wing, and DeVries received a 10-second time penalty, but both went out of the race and did not finish. And in his 60th start, Dan Ticktum is now a winner in Formula E, 4 seasons into his Formula E career, and this has been a long time coming for him. Remember, at one point he was a part of the Red Bull driver development program, but Dan Ticktum, has a history of, having a really bad temper and all of that. Lots of his competitors, didn't really like him. We heard word from teams that he was really hard to work with, and Dan Ticktum, he had acknowledged this in the post-race press conference, his reputation, all of that, but he's just out there, looking to prove that he belongs in this series, that he should be competing in a top form of motorsport. So definitely Dan Ticktum's been looking for this a long time and finally got that maiden Formula E win. And after this win, Ticktum is now 5th in the points, and the top 11 drivers in points are still mathematically eligible for the championship with 2 full race weekends to go. And some key notable drivers were eliminated this weekend: Sebastian Buemi in 12th, Stoffel Vandoorne in 13th, Jake Hughes in 14th, and then Sam Bird after that. And the next Formula E race weekend is a doubleheader in Berlin on July 12th and 13th, so a few weeks away, followed by the London E-Prix doubleheader to close out season 11. And a brief update on the grid ranking, which is going to be coming out later today once Joe gets situated. However, some significant changes will be noticed. Jean-Eric Verde has fallen out of the grid ranking for the first time in his career. Dan Ticktum is in the ranking. Marc Marquez has gotten around Oscar Piastri in the top 10. And Oliver Rowland has fallen out of the Formula E ranking top 10 as well. So there are no Formula E drivers in the top 10. And obviously after his big win today, Alex Palou is going to still be the leader of the grid ranking. So stay tuned for a full update later on tonight. And now we're almost out of time for tonight. We hope to get you all to the 4th quarter of the Game 7 of the NBA Finals. So we're going to end our show with our Grid 1 shining moment. Let us know down in the chat below, watching live or on replay, what's the one thing that stood out to you from this race? And we can have a lot to choose from, with all the races we see this weekend. So kind of going to start with you. What's your one shining moment?
I said coming into this season that Legacy Motor Club would be a lot better this season, and it turns out they are. Who would have thought that a year's time would have made some difference in team's performance? But it's not Eric Jones that's propelling that team ahead. It's, surprisingly, John Hunter Nemechek. The guy locked in a top 5 qualifying position this weekend and then backed it up by getting a 6th place finish today. And this is after he bottled the start of the race and fell back like 6 or 7 spots from his starting spot because he got a little too ambitious going into turn 1. I really can't say enough about Legacy Motor Club and John Hunter Nemechek. John Hunter Nemechek last year was one of the worst drivers in the NASCAR Cup Series. He had the highest crash rate of anyone in the last 15 years or something like that, which is really saying something considering Ricky Stenhouse has been in the field most of that time. Now, I don't know if it's a controversial take yet because I haven't really seen them have race-winning pace anywhere yet, but I'm going to say it. I don't think anyone should be surprised if the Legacy Motor Club car ends up in victory lane at some point this season. They have been running that good, and I know a lot of people love to laugh and point their finger at Jimmy Johnson last season when he was putting around in 29th place 2 laps down at Kansas, but you can't argue with the data. It definitely has helped, and that team is on the rise, and frankly, it's really nice to see the 42 and more importantly, the 43 car in the NASCAR Cup Series start to look competitive again.
Forgive me for taking the easy one, but Chase Briscoe's victory today at Pocono has to be a feel-good story, and to do it with that mishap on pit road, I think I just saw a tweet, James Small, saying that he expected them to be 9 laps short when they pulled away, and to be able to save that much fuel. I know some people have been talking about how Briscoe can be saving fuel and have Denny Hamlin hot on his heel, running wide open to try and chase him down, and can't do it. So that's a discussion for another day of next with the next gen car, I think. But in terms of what Briscoe did, take nothing away from his victory today, and badly needed, I think, a weight off his shoulders. And talking about the pressure that comes with being a JGR driver, now he's got that win, and well done to him. That's my one shining moment.
And I'm going to give my shining moment to Formula E racer just talked about. Dan Tickham's been through a lot in his career. He's been criticized a lot as well, and rightfully so, because when he was a young racer, he had this bad boy reputation. That he was really hard. People said he was really hard to deal with. Competitors didn't like him. None of the people who he had to work on the team liked him as well. And he even caught a scrape from George Russell a few races ago in Barcelona when Max and George made contact, and when George was asked, are there any other drivers who race the way Max do? And he said, I can think of one. He's another British driver who's currently racing in Formula E, and he was clearly talking about Dan Ticktum as well. And Dan Ticktum, has been a real talented driver, and the only thing that's really been keeping him from reaching his potential is, his off the track. Well, I guess not necessarily off the track antics, but just his demeanor and personality, which has rubbed a lot of people on the open wheel racing ladder system the wrong way, and especially the Cooper team as well. That team has really struggled in recent seasons in Formula E, and through all the struggles, Dan Ticktum has stuck with them, and they've continued to improve and get better over time through all the transitions, the team name and all of that, and now all of the team's hard work have been rewarded with a victory in Formula E. So got to give a call to the Cooper team and Dan Ticktum as well for getting the job done this weekend.
All right, thank you, Kobe, and thank you all for watching us tonight. I'll be back tomorrow for Grid Encore. Kobe, you'll be back on Wednesday night with Grid Tonight, so make sure you all stay tuned for that as well. And then we'll get back into our regular weekend routine, our NASCAR pre-race show later this week, and Grid Live will be back soon enough then as well. So make sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon so that you're never in the dark after we host a new stream or post a new video to our channel. For Tanner Smith, for Kobe Lambeth, I'm Ben Schneider. We will see you on the next episode. Have a great rest of your night, everybody. Enjoy the rest of Game 7.